Welcome to Running the Table, the podcast where we run through everything on the table in the world of sports. And week one in the NFL is in the books. And although we're not done with our NFL previews, that's okay. We're going to detour a little bit and recap week one of the NFL season, going through all of the games, recapping everything that you may have seen or may have missed over the course of the week. So, Tim, are you ready to go?
So excited that the NFL's back. Week one had, a lot of weird, crazy ups and downs. So we're gonna run through it all. Let's run it.
Football is fun.
You
Starting
know,
with the Thursday night game, the Detroit Lions taking on the Kansas City Chiefs, and the Lions hold off the Chiefs in a thriller 21-20. It was a hard-fought game. It was an ugly win for the Lions, but they came
hey,
through.
win's a win.
A win is a win. I mean, no Chris Jones, no Travis Kelce, but who cares? It's going into Arrowhead and defeating the defending Super Bowl champions. That is a huge win for the Lions. Jared Goff played well, 22 of 35 for 253 yards, a touchdown, and 0 interceptions. I think the weirdest thing that we saw from the Lions is the way they use their running backs. I think more people expected Jahmyr Gibbs to have a bigger role. He only carried the ball 7
He
times for
will.
42 yards,
He
9 total
will.
touches. David Montgomery saw the lion's share of the load, but big funny guy. 21 carries, 74 yards, and a touchdown. Amon-Ra St. Brown really shined as the leading receiver.
Hey,
6 catches on 9 targets, 71 yards, and a touchdown. And Sam Laporta in his debut, there's a lot of hype surrounding him as the tight end, is emerging as the number 2 option for Jared Goff in this passing game. Caught all 5 of his targets for 39 yards. On the other side, struggles for Mahomes without his primary pass catcher, especially with Kadarius Toney, who did
oh
not
boy.
have a great day. Uh, 1 catch on 5 targets for 1 lone yard. He had 1 more yard than
And don't forget the pick six
yeah,
that he
and
very much should have caught.
oh yes, ball went right through his hands, right to Brian Branch, and house call
Hey,
really swung the momentum of the game. And Kadarius Toney did
rookie
not
rookie
respond to it
pick
well.
six in week one is pretty cool. What a way
First
to
game of
start
the
off your time in
season,
the league.
but I mean, what does it say about the Detroit Lions moving forward?
I think it says that they have a lot of potential. I don't even think they played, their best game on offense. You talk about, Amon-Ra being the leading receiver. Josh Reynolds actually had 4 receptions for 80 yards. He was more of their chunk yard guy there. So he slightly outpaced him. But they've got options. I think
He could pass
some
that thing like
people
Stockton.
hey, I mean, Goff did, what he needed to do. The completion percentage wasn't, quite fantastic, but they moved the ball pretty well. I think that they will use Jahmyr Gibbs more. They
Mm-hmm.
they had talks and they did come out and say like they were planning on working him into, his role. They weren't planning on making him, the feature back right away. You saw the efficiency is there. He had 6 yards per carry as opposed to David Montgomery's 3.5. So I think that they could definitely use him more. And quite frankly, he could have had a touchdown on that stat line, but there was one of his bounce out runs that he ended up tripping literally just on the turf. But I like the way they look. I think Sam Laporta helps that offense. They had a bit of a vacancy once they traded TJ Hawkinson, and now they use Sam Laporta to help fill that. And I think he's going to continue to merge and be better and better. On the defensive side, I mean, they did well to stop the Chiefs. Obviously, when you don't have Travis Kelce, it does make a huge difference. But they still limited them. You have to remember that with the minor addition, but the addition of Kelce and a very similar receiving core. I mean, they won a
It's only
Super
just a
Bowl.
slight
So
addition.
yeah, but regardless, they were able to limit the run very well. Neither Pacheco nor Edwards-Helaire could really get anything going, and obviously they did enough on defense to slow him down. And I mean, coming up with a win in Arrowhead is never going to be easy, regardless of who's playing or who's not playing. So the Chiefs will be fine, but the Lions they showed they can contend, and they didn't even play their best football necessarily.
I completely agree. The Lions definitely stole the show in terms of the headlines saying that this is not your same old Lions team. On the Chiefs side, I agree with you. They're going to be fine. They just need to get
They'll be
healthy.
fine.
They have Chris Jones back in the fold, and I think they're going to
Yes.
be all right. Moving on to the next game, we're going to jump around a little bit because the Packers and the Bears squared off in the most historic rivalry in the National Football League. But the more things change, the more they stay the same, as Green Bay and Jordan Love, in his second career start, marched into Lambeau South and defeated the Bears 38-20. Jordan Love era in Green Bay starting off with a bang, and Packers fans are thrilled about it. Jordan Love's performance, he was 15 of 27, so the completion percentage wasn't where you need it to be, but 245 yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks, and the highest passer rating
all you really need him to do
after week 1. So he definitely got the job done. He made the big time throws that he needed to make. He was perfect on 3rd and 4th down, incredibly efficient, incredibly poised. That's exactly what you wanted to see from him. And they also got 33 the ball. Aaron Jones had himself a day, even though he was out for a lot of the second half with a hamstring. He's questionable going into next week, but 9 carries, 41 yards, and a rushing touchdown, and through the air, 2 catches on 4 targets for 86 yards and a touchdown. So a great all-purpose day for Aaron Jones. Romeo Doubs caught the other 2 touchdown passes. And on the other side, oh God, it's the same
whole lot of pain.
It's the same old Chicago Bears, and nobody should be surprised. But we didn't quite think they were going to look this bad and get walloped this poorly at home, because it was only an 18-point loss, but it should have been 24 because that last touchdown came in garbage time. Justin Fields,
and quite frankly, it felt surprising that they got 20 out of that offensive performance.
Yeah, Justin Fields had absolutely no time to throw, whether it was from the poor protection from the Bears offensive line or the ferocious pass rush from the Green Bay Packers. I think both are true in this case. Justin Fields went 24 for 37, which throwing the ball 37 times felt a little weird because he never really threw the ball downfield. 216 yards, a touchdown, and an interception, going for a pick 6 by Quay Walker. On the ground, he was the Bears' leading rusher, 9 carries, 59 yards.
Well, because their offensive line can't get any type of push to get any running backs going. So and the big thing is because of how much he was, running for his life. He really is a magician in the backfield. There was quite a few times where I really did not think that he was going to be able to get out of some of those situations that he did, and he turned 5-7 yard sacks into even just minimal gains.
So elusive.
If they can figure out just some of the other minimal things on the offensive line, that could change that offense drastically. But in the meantime, they've got a lot of work
play
to
calling
do
was
with
atrocious. Luke Getsy and the Bears did not really develop a great game plan offensively. What Justin Fields does well is runs and throws the ball deep, and they didn't really do either of any. There was one design quarterback run on a 4th and 1 very early, a QB sneak that didn't work. And a lot of the passing game was horizontal, a lot of checkdowns, which confirms that Justin Fields has evolved from running back to check down merchant. Either way, on the outside, the big story is Jair Alexander locked up DJ Moore. I don't think there's any other way to put it. The Bears had the first overall pick.
Fantastic performance.
Traded it for DJ Moore, and Jair Alexander held him to 2 catches, 2 targets, 25 yards. And I know a lot of Bears fans are asking, hey, we traded the first overall pick for this guy. Why didn't we use him? It's because he was never open, because 23 was always on him. And when you have a shutdown corner like Jair Alexander that can track a guy and follow him back and forth, you can do things like that. So overall, the Packers, an excellent week 1. They got to keep it rolling into week 2 if we can really say that this is like any kind of a good football team. But just a fantastic start for Jordan Love and the Packers. And on the Chicago Bears side, some questions emerges because Bears fandom is in absolute panic. Like, this is DEFCON, like, slam the panic button. Like, is Justin Fields the guy? Do we get the Marvin Harrison Jr. jersey ready? Do we tank for Caleb Williams? Like, it is a full-on disaster. And with Tampa Bay looming, lot of questions to be answered. Anything more from you on this game, Tim?
A couple things in general. Jordan Love played in overall well. There were certainly, and I know we talked about a little bit about this both during and after the game.
First half was rough. Yes,
the first half was a little rough. There were definitely some throws that felt like they either should have been made or at least should have been closer. There were some just kind of, very, bad misses. But overall, I mean, when you put up a
Second
stat
career
line,
start. He's
when you
not
put up a stat
supposed
line
to
of
be Aaron
245,
Rodgers. Like, yeah.
And once again, I'm not expecting to be, but that's what I'm saying. When you put up 245 and 3 touchdowns, you really can't complain
Not
about
worried
it.
about it.
The Bears did not make anything easier for themselves. That first drive was an absolute killer because you give up, that good field position, that touchdown early, and other than that, we pretty much held the Packers off in the first half. But it is a game plan like that is not sustainable when you cannot protect your quarterback and you can't give him any amount of time to find his receivers. Because obviously, yes, Jair did a fantastic job on DJ Moore, but they couldn't run any type of like complicated set by any means because Fields within maybe a second and a half was already getting flushed out of the pocket
and had a guy in his face
to go somewhere. So
yeah, it's incredibly tough to throw when you have such a skill, and like the front seven of the Green Bay Packers.
Oh, there's going
to be fantastic. That especially if the first round picks in 22, Devontae Wyatt and Quay Walker keep playing like they have played.
Wyatt looked really good, and obviously that
is going to be
was really solid.
That is going to be a strength of the team. One more thing before we move on. Yeah. Chase Claypool.
I'm so done with him, dude. Dropping screen passes, the
32nd overall pick for him.
The flopping on the one little push from the dude.
Yeah, that was cute.
Refuses to block at all. He is one of the worst mentality players that I've ever seen.
That was embarrassing. As a Packers fan, I'm embarrassed because how do you let like 5'10", 185 Keyshawn Nixon bowl right through you and get to Darnell Mooney on a screen pass? I don't understand how
that play blew my mind, but yeah, I'm so done with him. I kind of wish I'm willing to literally let that draft pick that we gave up go to waste and just straight up release him. I'd just rather him not be on the team because he's actively hurting as opposed to helping when he is on the field.
The draft pick that became Joey Porter Jr., for Chase Claypool, it's kind of seeming like a lost cause. But Tim, we got to get through these darn games, my guy. The next one of which being an NFC South divisional matchup, the Carolina Panthers and the Atlanta Falcons in Bryce Young's first career NFL start, and not a great day for NFL rookies in general as the Falcons beat them 24-10. But
except if your name is Bijan Robinson.
Yeah, the real star of the show was the Falcons' dual threat rushing attack because
keep in mind Cordero Patterson was out too.
Yeah, Patterson was out.
They didn't even have an option to use him. He's still going to be there.
Bijan Robinson did a lot of the pass catching work, 10 carries, 56 yards, but caught all 6 of his targets for 27 yards on a very pretty score. It was Tyler Algier that had the lion's share of the work at running back. 15 carries, 75 yards, and 2 touchdowns. You spend high draft capital on Kyle Pitts and Drake London and, Bijan Robinson.
Oh yeah, the Drake London that got a grand old 0 receptions.
Tyler Algier to the moon. Screw your fantasy teams. You don't give a darn.
Specifically for the backfield, though, this does make sense to me. Bijan is going to be much more of your dual threat guy. So you use Algier for 15 carries, Bijan for 10. So you let Algier have a little bit more of that rushing attack. You use Bijan a little bit more, versatility in both there. So
Algier is your thunder and Bijan's your lightning. It's a lot of what the templates, what we're seeing.
Algier also got 3 receptions of his own. So I mean, those guys in general, I feel like you are going to find a lot of essentially that dump down work with Desmond Ridder at quarterback. And I mean, he was 15 for 18. Again, use the strengths of your quarterback. Desmond Ridder is not going to be a guy, even though you have, a decent amount of what should be pretty good offensive weapons with Kyle Pitts, Drake London, yada, yada. Mm-hmm. But if they're able to work well in the underneath game and, combining running with screens, because that's what Bijan got his receiving touchdown on. If that works, go for it. They put up 24 points. You can't argue with that, even though the Panthers obviously didn't, do a whole lot to stop them.
Rough sledding.
Or help them out on offense.
Yeah, rough sledding in Bryce Young's first game, but we can expect a lot more of him going forward. Yeah. Next up, the AFC North divisional showdown in the rain between the Cincinnati Bengals and the Cleveland Browns.
Boy.
And Where in the world was the Bengals offense? It was
It's a great
nowhere to be
question.
found. The Browns absolutely dominated the game from start to finish, winning 24-3. Joe Burrow looked totally out of whack, 14 of 31 for 82 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. And T. Higgins was shut out, no receptions on 8 targets, which was
Wild.
really weird. Martin Emerson Jr. is a dog. He is an excellent corner too for the Browns alongside Denzel Ward. So they got a good one there. And on the Browns side, Deshaun Watson, not fantastic, but not horrible either.
He didn't need to be.
Exactly. A 16-29, 154 yards through the air, a touchdown and an interception, and on the ground, 5 carries, 45 yards, and a touchdown. So he was able to contribute in multiple ways. Nick Chubb passed the century mark in rushing, as well as got an unusually large receiving work, caught all 4 of his targets for 21 yards.
He's not usually much of a guy in the receiving game, but here's the thing: we could see this a little bit more in
Nick
the new
Chubb in the receiving game without Kareem Hunt there.
Yeah, first of all, that does make sense, and second of all, you could see a little bit more of this in, I guess, what you could call, again, the new era Browns of if they don't feel any particular reason to
new era Browns
air it
means
out.
Nothing to me. That doesn't mean anything. The more things change, the more they stay the same, and the Browns will be the Browns until proven otherwise. That's my story.
They balanced out their receiving, even though it was relatively limited. They did balance it out really well. You talk about 3 receptions each for Elijah Moore, the new receiver for them, and Amari Cooper. You got David Njoku with 2 of his own. So, I mean, they spread the ball around, so good for them. I think when they come up with an opponent that can actually test them a little bit more on the other side of the ball, that's when we're really going to see what this Browns team can really do, because the Bengals could get absolutely nothing going. It didn't really test the Browns very much. They, kind of coasted for a decent amount of the game. So I still think the Bengals are another team where
they're going to be fine.
We've seen this last year with the Bengals in week 1 when Burrow threw 3 interceptions to the Steelers and Minkah Fitzpatrick pick 6. So the Browns, I mean, good win. It was a bit of an unusual game. I'm not, particularly convinced that they're a fantastic team because of it, but they did what they needed to do. And if they're able to continue to essentially find ways to accomplish the little things and keep feeding Nick Chubb, they're going to find some success.
I completely agree. Next game we have on the slate is the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Indianapolis Colts. Anthony Richardson's debut was going swimmingly until it wasn't. Exited the game due to injury, although he didn't play particularly bad. 24-37, 223 yards, a touchdown and an interception.
And he threw that interception late. If he had just, if they had just, played a little bit smarter on that last drive going down,
and of course,
except for their last one, but
also had the rushing touchdown.
Yes,
but it was spoiled because the Jacksonville Jaguars are inevitable. Won the game 31-21. Trevor Lawrence.
That score is yeah, absolutely. That score is not particularly indicative because the Jaguars got like 2 touchdowns in the span of 6 minutes towards the end of that game. The Colts looked like they had a pretty good chance to close it out, and then one thing after another, turnover, 2 scores, and all of a sudden, it looks like it wasn't that particularly competitive.
Yeah, I completely agree. Trevor Lawrence is going to be one of the best quarterbacks in this league for a long time. He made throws.
I'm glad people continue to give him a chance
that not many guys in this league can make, and especially Calvin Ridley, dude. Lawrence,
his first half was
is going to be nasty. Calvin Ridley, 8 catches, 11 targets, 101 yards, and a touchdown. Zay Jones playing second fiddle, an underrated performance as well. 5 catches on 7 targets.
Where does this put Christian Kirk, though? That's going to be the real question going
55
forward.
yards and a touchdown.
He only had
Christian
1 catch.
Kirk. The big money Christian Kirk, who played pretty well last year, seemed kind of like the odd man out in this offense. Even Travis Etienne got going both on the ground and through the air. 18 carries, 77 yards, and a touchdown on the ground. 5 catches, 5 targets, 27 yards through the air. So it seemed like a complete team win for the Jacksonville Jaguars, being down early, really showing what you're made of. On the road in division, those games aren't easy to win. You're right. They stuck with it. They got through, and they came out victorious. So kudos to the Jags.
Yeah, you talk about they're definitely they're not easy to win, but at the same time, the Jaguars have had the Colts number in recent history, so I wasn't particularly surprised to see this outcome. But we talked about that receiving core, and you talk about sort of those two guys in, one guy out. And I feel like we will see a pretty consistent pattern with the 2 in, 1 out, but I think it will flip flop of who the two that are, having a solid game and the one guy that gets left out. There may be some games where you have a bit better balance, but in general, I think you'll find the guys that maybe have more favorable matchups or are just, playing super solid that game, and you'll get them the ball. But I think it'll be a little bit more rare that they have all three of those guys really going. And the running game, obviously, I mean, ETN busted out that touchdown towards the end there, which ended up having a pretty solid day for him, averaged 4.3 on the ground. You talk about getting a little bit involved in the passing game as well. And then they even got a rushing touchdown for Tank Bigsby. Or as his legal name states, Cartavius Bigsby, which is very
Tank
interesting.
Better.
Tank is more fun, but Cartavius is also a pretty cool name. I'm not going to lie. But on the Colts side of the ball, I think Colts fans can be optimistic with what they saw out of Anthony Richardson week 1.
It was a positive going forward. I think it was the best rookie performance that we saw. Granted, I mean, CJ Stroud didn't look great either. More on that later.
Not particularly
as we get to that game, but there is flashes there for Richardson, and I think that's the most important thing to see week 1.
Yeah, quite literally pretty much the only knock I would have on him, or the only two that I saw from that game, is please learn to slide. That's how we got, that slight injury towards the end, was he got essentially landed on trying to get towards the end zone. And he just has to continue to working on his decision making. That one interception was partially a decision-making error as much as it was a diagramming where you're throwing. He dropped back to pass and went looking. I'm throwing there. So they read it essentially the whole way. So he'll get better with it. They'll continue working on that. But overall, I think he looked pretty solid. He made some pretty good throws. Obviously, his athleticism is off the chart, so he'll be able to create a lot on the ground there. And I think it's going to be a matter of how they're able to get certain offensive weapons involved. We talked about Kylan Granson a little bit at the tight end position. They were able to get him going at least a little bit, 4 for 39 out of him. And of course, the star of the show being Pittman for them, 8 for 97 and a touchdown. So overall, I think the Colts, the fact that the Colts stuck with the Jaguars for as long as they did, and the fact that they actually were up for a decent amount of that game and well into the fourth quarter, I think they can be hopeful, because a lot of people going into this game would have said, yeah, the Colts should probably get throttled by 15 plus.
Heading over to Minnesota, we have the Bucs and the Vikings, as not many people pick Baker Mayfield and the Buccaneers to emerge victorious on this one. But
what did I tell you? The Buccaneers are not going to be that bad.
Well, let's hold the phone, because I also said that Minnesota Vikings defense is dookie cheeks, and
I think both were true in this game. I think we saw flashes of positivity out of Baker. I think he looked pretty solid, but he also, part of that was just how exposable this Vikings defense is.
Yeah, Look, Baker Mayfield looked pretty good, still has that dog in him, even though he is fighting for the opportunity to be a franchise guy somewhere. He's trying to prove to the rest of the NFL that, hey, I can still do this at a competitive level. He was 21 for 34, 173 yards, 2 touchdowns, and no interceptions. Mike Evans had himself a day amidst the trade rumors. 6 of 10 for 66 yards and a touchdown. Chris Godwin also got involved. Those are kind of like 1A and 1B in that offense, and it's pretty clear. On the other side, though, the Vikings are going to air this sucker out all season. Kirk Cousins threw the ball 44 times, and when you have the weapons on the outside to do it, why the heck not? 344 passing yards for Kirk Cousins, 2 touchdowns and an interception. Justin Jefferson did Justin Jefferson things, 9 catches, 12 targets, 150 yards. TJ Hawkinson was the safety blanket that we all know him to be, 8 catches, 9 targets, 35 yards and no touchdowns. But Jordan Addison had himself a pretty solid debut. 4 catches on 6 targets for 61 yards and his first career NFL score. So
pretty cool.
The Vikings, to me, seem a little bit one-dimensional. It's cause for concern.
I
Because when you're
mean, in this game, both teams looked pretty one-dimensional. The Buccaneers just didn't get much. They didn't get as much out of the passing game, but they didn't need to because they were able to cause turnover.
and that's a really big thing there. Rashad White and Baker Mayfield on the ground didn't really have much to contribute.
Very inefficient.
But then again, 20 points was enough to get it done. Alexander Madison, I don't think he's a lead back.
Not much better.
Don't. And I mean, hey,
I think he would need a better offensive line to be a lead back.
Look,
I don't think he can do enough creating himself.
That offensive line is fine. That offensive line should be
that's what I'm saying.
Enough.
But
because
that's the thing.
Cook
He doesn't need a fine offensive line. He needs a good offensive line.
Exactly. And I'm gonna be brutally honest here. If I'm a Vikings fan, I'm concerned. I am incredibly concerned because
this is not a game they should have lost. So I agree.
Because if your offense is one dimensional and you can't quite run the football, teams can just sit on the pass, although they should be able to get away with it. It's the defense that I was worried about and still am worried about, and it's what is eventually going to be their downfall, because guess what? You don't have the luck of the one-score games anymore. You've already lost more. You've already lost your first one-score game this year than they did last regular season, and they played in 11 of them. I know we like to beat that stat over your head, but like it's an important one, and it's why the Vikings won 13 games.
Yeah, and it's not going to be a consistent stat for them. So they may have been able to pull that off last year. But yeah, if you want to talk about stats for a second, the big thing I would point to is it is concerning for you to essentially double the other team's passing yards and still lose. That's a problem.
Yeah,
because you're talking about 173 to 344. That's a problem.
We will see if it gets fixed. The next game we got is between the Tennessee Titans and the New Orleans Saints in a sloppy, gritty game where the Saints won 16-15. Neither team looked particularly great. Derek Carr, the better of the two quarterbacks by far, 23
for sure.
305 for one touchdown, one interception. Definitely looked very comfortable with his new receivers. Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, and Michael Thomas all had pretty solid days for themselves. Olave, 8 catches, 112 yards. Shaheed, 5 catches, 89 yards, and a touchdown. And Michael Thomas, 5 catches for 61 yards, which I think is nice because Michael Thomas can still get going and doesn't need to be the number one receiver.
Will we see more than 2 weeks of football out of Michael Thomas? Stay tuned.
Dude, I hope so, because at this point, I'm rooting for Michael Thomas. But on the other side, Ryan Tannehill may or may not be the answer. Look, you have 2.
It certainly didn't look like it in that one.
On rookie contracts. Is it time to move on to one of them? Because Ryan Tannehill in this game, 16 of 34, 198 yards, blank on the TD column, but a trio of picks. So not a great performance.
Not good.
Titans fans, you could chime in on this one, but you can't quite go anywhere if it's the Derrick Henry show and you just pepper DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, he's looking at least he's getting the ball. 13 targets for DeAndre Hopkins, turning into 7 catches for 65 yards, but just a sloppy game overall.
Yeah, to be fair, if you look at the rest of the Titans receiving core, do you blame them for trying to throw to him 13 times?
No,
that's what it comes down to. I mean, they even broke away 2 receptions for 56 yards for Derrick Henry, which is also very unusual for him. He averaged 4.2 yards per carry, so pretty decent for him, but not as good as we've seen him in the past. I was a little bit surprised by the inefficiency of Jamal Williams, only 2.5 yards per carry, 18 for 45. I was not particularly impressed by that. I was hoping for better. Olave continues to do Olave things. I think he will truly thrive with Carr at the quarterback, even though he wasn't able to find the end zone. He still had a very solid day. And I think, the combination of Olave, I guess, maybe Rashid Shaheed will actually find a consistent receiving presence in this.
I mean, he could emerge as a pretty solid number 3 for Derek Carr. If Rashid Shaheed is your number 3, no complaints. No complaints.
Exactly.
In that
if you're able to keep those 3 guys healthy and utilize them similar to how you did in this game, fantastic. All they really need to do now is get some semblance of a run game, and I think they will start to look pretty solid. What really struggled for them is they could get absolutely nothing going on the ground, so they really had to go through the air to get pretty much any of their points. I don't know how to feel about the Titans. They really just don't seem like they have much going on. You're not at a point where you can get carried by Derrick Henry anymore, and they don't have enough options in the receiving game to do literally just about anything.
It was a frustrating day for both teams, but one team had to win. Saints by 1 point. Over in Pittsburgh, the 49ers had a field day, kicking the
Back to the
Steelers
Brock
down a
show.
flight of stairs, winning 30-7. And it was the Brock show. Brock Purdy is better than we gave him credit for. 19 of 29, 220 yards, 2 touchdowns, and no interceptions. He
Super
played
solid.
a fantastic game, but it also helps when you
He
have
looked
Christian
comfortable.
McCaffrey.
He looked
Yeah.
comfortable out there, though.
Yes,
That's
he
what it
did.
came down to me. Like he looked like he was just vibing the whole game.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it also does help when Christian McCaffrey runs for 152 yards and a touchdown on 22 carries.
Sure.
And it also helps when Brandon Ayuk is looking like the wide receiver one in that offense and not Deebo Samuel. 8 catches,
that was kind of crazy
on 8 targets, 129 yards, and
do they have some connection
of scores?
I don't some kind of know. Connection that we like haven't really like heard of before, because I mean, we talk about like the back shoulder fade in the front corner of the end zone, perfectly placed, great catch. Brandon Ayuk, I mean, just torched Patrick Peterson pretty much all game after Patrick Peterson talked about getting an interception. Then he got torched and had 2 touchdowns put on his head.
It didn't quite happen.
Yeah, I mean, in general, I think their goal is going to be, can you keep Christian McCaffrey healthy and putting up consistent rushing numbers? Because I mean, part of that 152 is he had his big breakaway run at least at one point. That obviously helps your stats incredibly. But again, what this team does is they don't always need to be flashy to get stuff done. And despite, the big flashy run out of McCaffrey, a lot of Brock Purdy's game, a lot of their receiving game is not super flashy. My question is can you establish Kittle as a receiving option again? Because they really haven't in a substantial amount of time.
Yeah, but they don't need to. Kittle can just
I know they don't need
as a blocker and
he's a fantastic blocker.
Be an occasional receiver. Like George Kittle does not need to be the star of this offense in order for them to have success.
I'm not talking about a star though. Like for him to be a more consistent, like he was 3 for 19 on for this game. If they could get him up to like even like a 30-40 yard receiver per game, that changes that team so much more, because now you have to think about him.
Does it though?
I think it does.
Does it?
Because to me, a team that utilizes tight,
it doesn't
tight
matter.
End.
It doesn't matter. You're planning for George Kittle anyway. He's still one of the best tight ends in the NFL. And the 49ers put up 30 points on a very good Pittsburgh defense. So George Kittle could have like 100 yards on like 10 catches, because you have so much to worry about anyway, because then you're forgetting about Deebo Samuel. And then the next thing you know, Deebo Samuel
apparently Brandon Ayuk
gonna rack up like 200 scrimmage yards. So like I find that question honestly irrelevant. But
and that's fair. For the Steelers though, they've got some serious issues. First of all,
Kenny Pickett looked in the preseason. He was dog water. Absolutely.
First of all, if you are going to ask Kenny Pickett to throw the ball 46 times, you are already off to a bad start. Second of all, when Najee Harris like actually has a decent average, and average is 5.2 per carry, why do you only run him 6 times?
Game script. They were down the entire game.
I know, but if he's having an efficient day, you have to be able to use that, because that's going to help your passing game so much more.
I guess, but
feed the dude at, like, you can't even get him to 10 carries when he's averaging 5.2. But welcome to exactly why I don't like the Steelers, is because I don't think Matt Canada can properly utilize the weapons on this team. And now you've got Deontay Johnson out with a hamstring injury, potentially for a couple of weeks. You're starting to limit your options even more. They really kind of have to hope that, George Pickens can pick up a lot of that slack. The one bright spot, you found Allen Robinson, which, the Rams were unable to do pretty much at all. So that is at least a minor bright spot for them. But they need to find more of a balance. Obviously the game script, screwed them in terms of passing versus running, but if they want to have success, they have to be able to both run and pass the ball, and not ask Kenny Pickett to throw the ball realistically 40 plus times. They asked him 45 plus times. You got to keep him in the 30s.
No, I mean, I completely agree. I mean, thankfully for the Steelers, they don't have to play the 49ers every weekend. So they can thank the schedule makers for that. Next up, we have the Cardinals and the Commanders as the
Oh boy.
Commanders get the job done
Yippee!
in
What
Washington,
fun.
20-16. I mean, there's really not much more to say other than they got the job done. Sam Howell went 19 of 31 for 202 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. Had a rushing touchdown as well, but there's really not that much more that I can highlight that was positive
It didn't
because you
feel that
beat the Josh
exciting.
Dobbs led Cardinals by 4 points at the very end of the game. So what is there really to hang your hat on? You
Yeah.
just have to power through and advance to the next week.
Yeah.
It's in the
Yeah.
it is in the books. And is there really much more we have to say about it, or can we just
the
move
only thing
on?
that I find that's kind of amusing is, you talk about check down merchant. Josh Dobbs passed the ball 21 times and got 132 yards out of it. So, or sorry, completed 21 passes. He threw it 30 times. But yeah, that was not. I'm glad I didn't tune into that one. Let's just say that.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Next up, we have the Texans and the Ravens. The Ravens decisively defeated the Texans in CJ Stroud's debut, 25-9. But as much as CJ Stroud struggled, he threw the ball 44 times. You talk about guys that pass the ball a lot. You don't really want to throw the ball 44 times and have a good game. Lamar Jackson didn't look great either. Even though the completion percentage was high, the efficiency was incredibly low. And this is not the Lamar Jackson that we're used to seeing. I mean, so poor quarterback play from a rookie, fine. Poor quarterback play from a former league MVP, not quite time to hit the panic button, but you're concerned. Another thing you're concerned with on the Ravens side is the injury bug. It's already hitting you because J.K. Dobbins can't have
Oh
anything
man,
nice in this world. Torn
I feel bad
Achilles.
for the dude.
It's like the second worst torn Achilles this weekend, dude. Achilles injuries suck. But you know what? At least he got a touchdown before his season was over. I think
That's
the
crazy.
brightest spot for the Ravens was definitely Zay Flowers. Guy
Oh,
is
for
going to
sure.
be a baller in this league. And
He looks super electric out
if
there.
he's not already the wide receiver one for Lamar Jackson, then
He might as well
he's
be.
gonna be. 9
Yeah.
catches, 10 targets, 78 yards. On the Texans side, I mean, Nico Collins and Robert Woods both had pretty solid days receiving, 6 catches for each of them, a combined 137 yards on a combined 21 targets. I mean, CJ Stroud looked to his safety nets early and often. So this is kind of what we come to expect from the Texans. It wasn't going to be pretty. The Ravens are the Ravens, and they will end up probably being contenders in the AFC. So, just keep on forging forward for the Texans, and for the Ravens, get Lamar back on track, please.
Yeah, for the Texans, I think you would like to see to get a little bit better efficiency out of Dameon Pierce. For the receiving side, I mean, getting Nico Collins and Robert Woods 6 receptions each, cool. They just need to find the end zone.
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to. And then for the Ravens, obviously J.K. Dobbins going down again is super frustrating, super sad for them.
Oh yeah,
They'll
100%.
find their options. I mean, they got Justice Hill in the end zone twice, which great. Obviously, he didn't have much yardage. But Lamar's, I don't know what it was, but they really got to get Lamar back on track. First of all, getting Mark Andrews back should help with some of that. We all know how much the Ravens love utilizing their tight ends, and Isaiah Likely just couldn't get anything going in that game. He only had 1 reception for 4 yards. So I think they're another team that didn't have a great performance, but I think they'll be back. I think they will bounce back, and they still put up 25 points, but it wasn't particularly convincing or grand 25 points. Let's just put it that way.
In the Mile High City, the Denver Broncos and the Las Vegas Raiders played, and the Raiders emerged victorious last second, 17-16. Jimmy G led them to a victory. And I honestly do think it starts with that early onside kick from Sean Payton. You're back in the league. You're making a statement. Fantastic. You gave Jimmy G a short
What a
field, and
time.
he took it right down the end zone and scored a touchdown. Both of the Raiders touchdowns were passing TDs, both to Jacoby Myers, who starred as the primary pass catcher instead of Devontae Adams, which, breath of fresh air, concerning, I don't know. You tell me. Jacoby Myers, 9 catches on 10 targets, 81 yards and 2 touchdowns. Devontae Adams, 6 catches on 9 targets, 66 yards and no touchdowns. So Devontae Adams still did well, but he wasn't the world breaker that we expected of him. On the other side, Russell Wilson had a surprisingly nice stat line, 27 to 34, 177 yards, 2 touchdowns, and no picks. Javonte Williams, 13 carries, 52 yards, and no touchdowns. Back off of that torn ACL. So I guess what we got to take away from this is even Jimmy Garoppolo can make great plays every once in a while, and he looks comfortable in Josh McDaniels' offense. I almost said Mike McDaniel for a minute, but Mike McDaniel's the guy in Miami that's making music and offenses hum. But this is a different McDaniel. I mean, Jimmy Garoppolo, first start as a Raider, looked pretty solid. And on the other side, it's a process. Don't rush it. I think that's a positive from Russell Wilson that he played a lot better. The finished meal was a lot better tasting and a lot less sour than the things that he cooked last year. So
a lot less burnt.
Yeah, a lot less burnt. No picks.
Yes. Yeah, for me, overall, I mean, I think a pretty good start for the Raiders. Big thing is not really getting Josh Jacobs going at all. That Broncos D line really ate him up. 19 for 48, only averaged 2.5 yards per carry. I think it's hilarious that Jacoby Myers could not find the end zone at all during his time with the Patriots last year, and he comes to the Raiders and gets 2 in week 1. But you talked about Myers versus Adams and talking about wide receiver 1 type thing. I think you will see both types of games relatively frequently, depending on how teams try to play. A lot of teams will really try to hone in on Devontae Adams, and that will open up Jacoby
certainly
Myers'
helps when you have
options
Devontae Adams
more
on the other side.
Yes. And there'll be some games where it's just Devontae's game and he starts cooking and he gets 10 plus receptions and has a monster game. It'll depend on how teams try to play. But good for Jacoby. I'm glad to see him, actually get some decent success. And for Jimmy Garoppolo, I mean, 20 for 26, 200, pretty solid. The 1 interception is, obviously, I don't think that was his fault. I want to say, I think it was a tipped ball as well. For the Broncos, Russell Wilson, 27 for 34, great. You would like to see more than 177. You definitely have a lot of low yardage passes there, but the 2 touchdowns, exactly, baby steps. The 2 touchdowns, no interceptions is fantastic. You got pretty good efficiency out of your backfield, 4.0 yards per carry for Javonte and 5.1 for Samaje Perine. I think the big thing for them is getting as much production and healthy out of their receiving core, because obviously their receiving core is well known to be beat up with losing guys like KJ Hamler and
Jerry
Tim
Jeudy.
Patrick. Well, Tim Patrick, I'm saying both those guys, if I'm not mistaken, for the season.
Yeah.
And then Jerry Jeudy obviously was out for this one. So you want to get him back healthy. Obviously, they found the end zone with Cortland Sutton and Lil Jordan Humphrey, which I thought was a fun little tidbit there. So I think, like you said, baby steps. I certainly didn't hate this performance, and I would not dislike this performance if I was a Broncos fan. You came close. Obviously, you would have liked to get the win, but I think they're trending in the right direction.
In New England, they retired Tom Brady's jersey, had a ceremony, and yes, Tom Brady is still not playing football. Stop asking. He probably pretty much, I can almost tell you, will not be playing for the New York Jets this season because he'd have
Possibly,
to jump.
maybe.
No, stop. Please, God, no. He'd have to jump through a crap ton of hoops to do so, and stay retired, Tom. On the other side, though, the Eagles won that game 25-20, but it wasn't the prettiest fashion. The Eagles jumped on them early, and the Patriots, great poise. They came back and made it a game, especially from Mac Jones. Although very uncharacteristic for the Patriots to pass the ball 54 times.
Yeah, very weird.
But I will say 35 completions, 316 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception for Mac Jones.
It's a lot better than I'm used to seeing. A lot
of that production coming in the second half where they made the majority of their comeback. That is a lot to be proud of. And on the Eagles side, yes, you won the game, but Jalen Hurts did not look great. Not the MVP performance that we expected out of him. A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith did okay, but both got outshone by Kendrick Bourne, who had 6 catches on 11 targets, 64 yards, 2 touchdowns. The Philly backfield situation is really interesting to me because Kenny Gainwell had the majority of the touches.
No longer a committee, I guess? Maybe
I
they'll work DeAndre Swift
Look,
in
dude,
more,
I
but
guess it's Kenny Gainwell's backfield with DeAndre Swift and Rashad Penny bringing up the rear. But
don't forget about Boston Scott. He got a rush too.
hooray. Congratulations.
I'm just saying it's a
He
weird,
can have
confusing
one
situation there.
participation cookie, one for every single rushing attempt he had in the game. So, I mean, for the Eagles, concerning, kind of. All that matters is the W or L, but definitely some stuff to clean up. And the Patriots hung with them. Not bad, New England.
Yeah, I don't know whether to be a little bit concerned for the Eagles defense or credit the Patriots offense. I'm more inclined to credit the Patriots offense
I
because,
am
in
too.
general, they did some different stuff. They looked better. They spread the ball out a lot, very
Mm-hmm.
well. You had 6 receivers with 30 plus receiving yards. So they really just found a lot of different guys at different points in the game. Their backfield they didn't have a fantastic game with Ezekiel Elliott in his limited carries looked decent with a 4.1 yards per carry there, but Ramondre got more of the workload with 12 for 25 with only 2.1.
Do you really
Not
expect
great.
that kind of performance from Zeke again? Do we really?
Yes. Also, we have to remember that we're going against the Eagles defensive line here. So I don't want to, shine too much on that with
Week 1 is also strange. So let's
yeah,
hold our peanuts real quick. So
yeah.
either
For
way,
the
I
Eagles,
think that was a weird game
I was
overall.
for sure. For the Eagles though, I think again, first game's always going to be weird. I think you saw some flashes of some good things. They almost lost it there towards the end, but they held it together when they needed to.
Oh
So
boy.
they definitely have quite a bit to learn there, and I think they'll get back to being more comfortable in the following weeks.
In arguably the game of the week, the Miami Dolphins and Los Angeles
Oh
Chargers
boy.
engaged in a full-fledged shootout. The Dolphins emerging victorious 36-34. And that electricity that we said that the Dolphins were really good at.
Stop me if you've heard this before, but the Chargers lost a one-score game.
Oh my God. In the most Chargers way possible, too. But, I kind of want to talk about the Dolphins first because you got to give them their
Yeah.
flowers.
Oh, absolutely.
What a day from Tua. 466 yards through the air and 3 touchdowns. Almost half of those, though, went to Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill had 11 catches on 15 targets, 215 receiving yards, and
It's
2
crazy.
scores. My goodness, have yourself a day, sir. Cheetah.
He's crazy. He is such a difference maker. And I guess who needs a running game if you can pass for 466 yards? Because they definitely didn't get much out of the backfield, but that, as we've
Let's
talked
just
about before,
I would
that's
ask,
what we
is it
expect.
sustainable? But you know what? I'm not gonna do that. Well, you know what? I wasn't gonna
I
answer
don't
the
know.
question, and I was just gonna enjoy what kind of a brilliant passing performance that we saw, and just kind of
It
enjoy it
was
for what it is, and rather ask oh, is it gonna last? Let's not be a party pooper here because that was a fun game. Anytime you get to chuck the ball
100%.
around for almost 500 yards, you got to appreciate it. I think for the
Yeah.
Chargers, what was really strange was their backfield approach, going with a running back by committee, because both Austin Eckler and Joshua Kelly had 16 carries, but they were both incredibly efficient. Eckler had 117 yards on the ground and Kelly had 91 yards on the ground. So when you have 2
Yeah.
backs that
Both found the
had
end zone too.
really good games, both got rushing touchdowns. I think it's a little bit interesting because what we expected of the Chargers was Herbert was going to air it out to his trio of receivers in Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, and Quentin Johnston. But, it was the run game that really was the star of the show. So I think that can create some really interesting possibilities for the Chargers. I mean, granted, they lost, but it's still a long season. And I'm electing to look at the bright side of things here, just because you have your dynamic quarterback in your pass game, and then you add in a dynamic run game, recipe for success in the future, if they don't charger it up, of course.
Yeah, exactly. You'd like to see a little bit more out of their defense in terms of stopping, because putting up 34, you really can't complain about. But when you're getting torched by Tyreek Hill a game, there's only so much you can do. I think the only possibility that I could point towards in the sort of running back by committee approach, it has come out afterwards that Eckler is dealing with some amount of an ankle injury. So it's very possible that later on in the game they decided to filter in a little bit more of Josh Kelly to try to give Eckler a little bit of a break. And because Josh Kelly was doing relatively decently, I mean, stick with them as for a decent amount there, and they
Earn
did
your
for
carries, young
a lot
man.
of for a lot of those later drives, they did go with a lot of Joshua Kelly. So in the receiving game, you'd like to see maybe a little bit more in terms of, some of the production out of your star guys, but I mean, they still passed for 228 yards and got over 200 on the ground. So overall, obviously a super high scoring game. The Dolphins are just, they are super electric. I think we will find some games where they fall flat on their face when something doesn't go right, when something isn't working. But I feel like
It
we'll see
is
a lot of.
inevitable.
I feel like we're going to see a lot of roller coaster out of this Dolphins team. The Chargers essentially just need to right the ship a little bit in terms of consistency, because they put up a lot of points. But if you're going to put up a lot of points, you also got to be able to try to do something on the defensive end.
One more thing about the Chargers before we move on. If they had the right head coach, I believe they would be Super Bowl contenders. Is that bold?
I mean,
is that bold to say? I'm not sure.
I don't think it's.
But you
I
have a
don't think it's
dynamic
that bold.
offense. You have a lot of good personnel on defense. It's got to be somewhere, and I don't think Brandon Staley is built for this, man. I really don't, because this is a problem that is perpetuating itself season after season after season.
And
Johnny
that's
can't
where I
read,
agree.
not because Johnny can't read. It's because the teacher isn't a very good teacher, and Brandon Staley just isn't a very good teacher. I mean, by the way, Bears fans, that also explains why Justin Fields is bad, because he should be good almost anywhere else. But the Bears,
But we want a defensive head coach.
yeah, but the Bears essentially Trubisky'd him. But look, we could do a whole episode on that if you really, really wanted to.
That's for later.
Yeah, it is.
But no, I entirely do agree with you at this point on the Staley remark, because
Fix it.
the commonality, and we've seen it enough times now. A lot of times you don't want to necessarily, after like a season or maybe even two, is like, you don't really want to dog on a guy. You got to give him a chance. Brandon Staley's gotten his chances, and they've been, this close as far from reaching essentially where they need to be. And he has not been able to make the necessary adjustments to get them to that next level of elite, especially in this AFC. You got to start questioning if things continue to be, borderline good to mediocre in this season, whether or not it's truly time to move on from him.
Look, once is an aberration, twice is concerning. Any more than that,
and three is Brandon Staley.
Yeah, and that's all I got to say about that. But on the other side of the Los Angeles football world, the Rams returned to form against the Seahawks, winning a decisive game on the road, 30-13. How about Matt Stafford? He reminded us, I think we all forgot how good Matt Stafford really is when his elbow doesn't have pins and needles in it. But he was chucking that thing around. No Cooper Kupp,
without Cooper Kupp,
no problem. If y'all don't know the name Pukanakwa, learn it, because he is good. 10 catches, 15 targets, 119 yards, tied for the most receiving yards on the team with Tutu Atwell. 6 catches, crazy. 8 targets, 119 yards as well.
I think it's crazy to get 334 passing yards, and they still scored all 3 of their touchdowns on the ground. I mean, you get 2 touchdowns out of Kyron Williams. You get another touchdown out of Cam Akers.
Now that's they did run the ball, baby.
They ran the ball a lot. In general, there was a lot of possessions. There was a lot of both. I mean, 38 passes, and combined between your 2 running backs, 37 carries. So a very balanced game on that side of things. But interesting to see how they'll try to use Kyren Williams in the future, because I didn't necessarily see that much of a balance coming in that backfield, but he didn't look all that bad. He had a much better yards per carry than Cam Akers did. Cam Akers 22 for 29, averaging 1.3.
Fantasy managers, go get Kyren Williams, because he is going to
he
get
very well
more
might
touches.
emerge as, yes, if he can keep up that average. I mean, obviously he also was the one that found the end zone
I
more
swear
times.
to God, if you steal either Puka Nakua or Kyren Williams on me in any waiver wire in any of our leagues, I will be very, very, very upset with you. Okay, because I know you. I know you trickster. You are a huckster. You do these kinds of things and you'll make me upset.
Yes, we'll just have to see.
Anyway, welcome back, LA Rams. We missed the dynamic offense. We missed the Sean McVay offense that we know and love. Matt Stafford slinging it around. And I truly do think it's good for football. We got 2 games left. This next one shouldn't take much talk.
What about the Seahawks? What'd the Seahawks do?
What about them?
I mean, they also played in that game.
They stunk.
I mean, you're not wrong, but I mean, you saw some flashes out of Kenneth Walker. He was able to have a pretty decent outing. You at least found the end zone with DK Metcalf. I think it's worth mentioning some of the individual
Tim,
guys.
They put up 13 points. Up yours,
yes.
Seahawks. Play better, and maybe I'll talk about you.
They definitely have a lot to improve on, but
you know what?
I'm glad to see Kenneth Walker back and doing well.
You know what? I didn't talk much about the Seahawks, and that's completely okay. I'm going to talk even less about the Giants. They stunk. This was all the Cowboys. 40-0. 40-0.
That was so bad.
And Dak Prescott had this many passing touchdowns.
And he only threw for 143 passing yards, and they put up 40 points. But welcome to the Cowboys defense and special teams.
Complete and utter beatdown, drumming, humiliation, obliteration, whatever adjective you want to use. That's all I have.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes down to the Cowboys just looked playing better in every aspect of the game, and they never gave the Giants a chance. So they didn't even have to do much on the offensive end.
Yeah, and Kadarius Toney, shut up. Just because the Giants played bad doesn't mean that you get to talk crap. You played bad too. Just stop it.
So social media definitely gave it to him, and he tried giving it back, but it doesn't look good on either side.
No. And the Monday night game, a thriller. Why can't the Jets have anything nice? Did they win the game in overtime? Yes.
I'm pissed off at the NFL script for this one.
Was it an exciting overtime game? Yes. 22-16. Jets win on September 11th, as all things should be. But why did Aaron Rodgers have to tear his Achilles 4 plays into his Jets career?
That just sucks.
And I'm gonna say it right now. He doesn't come back from this. I see.
He very well may not.
I see a very, 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 very small sliver of a chance that he comes back and plays again. But if he does play again, 40 years old, surgically repaired Achilles, it's not going to look good. Father Time is undefeated, and Father Time just took a sledgehammer to one of the greatest quarterbacks
right
of all
to the
time.
back of your heel.
And there is nobody that is more upset about it than true Packer fans. You know what? Karma to that bar in Milwaukee that all of the patrons thought that they were going to get their drinks for free. You know what? Good on you. Good on you. Pay your drinks. Pay all of your drinks. All right? Because as Green Bay Packer fans, we wanted Aaron Rodgers to succeed for the Jets. He gave us 18 wonderful years as a Packer. The least we could do is support him in his new endeavor, and he gets taken out before we even get to experience him. That is a damn shame, and quite frankly, as an NFL fan, I feel robbed of that experience.
Yeah,
100%. Because there was so much hype. I was so looking forward to watching Aaron Rodgers tear it up, but I don't know.
Instead now the Jets are left searching for what can they do to try to contend this season. Because
Is Zach Wilson the guy? Is he really the guy? Or are you
he
going to go
doesn't
get
he
Carson
doesn't
Wentz or
feel
Matt Ryan or Robert Griffin III, who campaigned himself for the Jets quarterback?
he's crazy.
But
He's crazy.
I think the fact
But
that we're even addressing this is like, right,
they don't
which
have any good
which really
options.
sucks, because what you want to see and what I hope the Jets do is rally around Zach Wilson, because
I think that's their best bet.
there look, there's no other option. Sink or swim. It's either Zach Wilson or you pull somebody off the streets. Not great options overall. So put your faith in the guy that you drafted second overall and rally around him and salvage this season for Aaron.
Yeah. Yeah, and especially for, you talk about the potential future of your franchise, hiring some, signing some guy from free agency. You talk about Matt Ryan, Carson Wentz, any one of those guys, older, not currently on a team for a reason. That's not going to help the future of your franchise. If you ride with Zach Wilson and try to put everything into elevating his game and trying to continue to work on him as a quarterback, that is the only way that you can push forward and actually try to make something, even a slight silver lining out of all of this as a franchise.
It doesn't quite make sense to bring in Carson Wentz or Matt Ryan, because if you really
No.
wanted a veteran to lead and help Zach Wilson develop, guess what? Even though he has a torn Achilles, you have a guy that is better than anybody that you can pick up, on the market. Aaron Rodgers was a mentor to a guy in Green Bay named Jordan Love, who looked pretty darn good in his first major action. So if he has the potential to do the same for Zach Wilson. And on the other side, we had concerns about the Buffalo Bills, but is it worse than we ever could have imagined? Because Josh Allen is continuing to regress. He's going the other way. He got Jordan Whitehead an incentive of $250,000. Like, Allen by himself,
3 interceptions,
earned Jordan Whitehead a payday on week 1. So, I really don't think there's much more other than, like, I might start hitting the panic button on the Bills very, very soon if it doesn't get better. And
I gotta be honest,
I can't believe that we end it this way, because like now I have a bad taste in my mouth.
It's such a sour. It was a very sour ending to week 1, because obviously with football being back, it was very great. But this game, close game, the overtime punt return for the win, very exciting. But everything just felt so tinged because of the fact that how drastic that the season has now changed for the New York Jets with that. But a couple of things I want to just go over about the game itself. I mean, Bills concerning, they had to pass the ball too much. They didn't get anything out of the run game. We've known this before, but when you throw 3 interceptions, it looks that much worse. For the Jets, great to see Breece Hall back and looking pretty electric. He doesn't quite have that closing speed. You saw that one breakaway that he wasn't able to get all the way to the end zone, but good to see him back and having such an effect, right off the bat in week 1. Receiving and passing, I mean, it's going to be limited again unless they find a way to bring more out of Zach Wilson. 14 for 21, 140 yards, a touchdown and a pick. You limit what all these weapons that you do have can do. So it'll be interesting to see the punt return by Xavier Gibson was really cool. Obviously, the Hard Knocks guy who had his little 15 minutes of fame, having that interview of finding out that he's on the team. Cool for him to have his moment in week 1, but man, it just hurts because we will never know what this Jets team could have looked like this season. That's one of the things that I was really, really interested to see.
That's all we got for our week 1 recap. We will be recapping each and every week of NFL football as it goes along. The stories, the games, the exciting moments, and even the sad parts, because, this is football. The emotions are high, the games are fun, and football is back.
Got it all.
If you want to find us on podcast platforms, you can, anywhere podcasts are available, and especially on YouTube. We talk a lot of football on here, but we also talk about other sports. So if you haven't watched our stuff, go check out some of our other videos. You want more from us? Let us know. And until next time, we out.